2021 was a great year for movies, is something I'm not going to state today. That's not to say that they were all bad. There are definitely some great films. I don't know, maybe it's my own fault though. I try to watch as many 2021 releases as I could, and I would say I actually missed a few, some that were actually rated pretty highly as well. And with everything, when you tend to watch a lot of movies, you tend to have a bit of a bell curve, so you're going to inevitably watch a lot of average films. But that bell curve might be a little bit skewed the other way. I'm going to give short and quick reviews. I'm sure you've heard about a lot of these films. If you haven't, then anything that's over 3.5 stars is probably something I'd actually recommend to watch yourself. Here's my rating system from 0.5 star to 5 star. It might be a little bit different from your perception, but this is just the way that I rate it. It's a good guide to let you know like what I actually feel about it. And of course, I'll timestamp all of the films in the description too. The Father. Man, this was something else. The film did what it set out to do. It did really well to give us the same sort of feeling that the main character was going through. It was so well written, so well produced, just so well acted by everyone. I'm starting with this movie because I want people to go out and see it. It's amazing. It's heartbreaking. It's just so great. I'm going to leave it at that. Watch this film. 5 out of 5. The Matrix. I don't think anyone thought that this was going to work out well, but let me tell you, they were right. Fuck, what a mess. The Matrix is still surviving from their one and only good movie. But I think this film was a train wreck for a reason. The first act, which coincidentally is the best part of the film, kind of actually explains this. I do seriously think Lana Wachowski intended to destroy the franchise with this film. It's just not worth watching at all. The only one worth watching is of course the first one, which is a phenomenal film. This one, only because of its decent first act, gets a 2 out of 5. Nightmare Alley. This is one of the movies that was on a long list of films that I actually thought that I'd really enjoy, but it just really wasn't that interesting. All the actors did a really good job, but the rest of the film was just okay. It didn't push an envelope, and the ending was... The film was good, just not that good. Not much else to say. 3 out of 5. The Eternals. This movie should have been called A Group of People Constantly Lining Up Perfectly in Unrealistic Circumstances. I think this is the worst Marvel movie, and that's saying something. I didn't care for any of the characters, which ended up being like a cast of 10 or more. Marvel movies tend to work well, and I think this is for every superhero movie. They tend to work well when they're more seated a little bit more in reality. I truly hated this movie, and there's no doubt you will too. 1 out of 5. Army of the Dead. This was like a big Netflix movie at the time because Zack Snyder was making a straight to Netflix film. But it was, I don't know, pretty forgettable. And let's be honest, Zack Snyder has not made that many great movies. It's not a bad film. I guess it's also just not a really good film either. 2.5 out of 5. Army of Thieves. This was actually an interesting one. I really thought it was going to be a train wreck because it was a prequel to Army of the Dead, but it was actually pretty fun. It was enjoyable, even if it had moments of being a little bit mindless. I really liked the main character and the actor who played him. This movie, unlike Army of the Dead, actually had a bit of heart to it. 3 out of 5. Shang Chi. Let's just get all the Marvel stuff out of the way. There were some fun scenes in this, but it was a pretty dull story, as always. It's too cookie cutter. They need to find more of a uniqueness. The structure of these Marvel movies works to make them sort of like okay movies, but it's getting so repetitive now. They're just easy watches and they're nothing special. And with better casting choices and a little bit of more flair, it could have been 100%, 200% better, but it just wasn't. 2.5 out of 5. Burnam Inside. I think I'll be scattering my controversial opinions throughout this video, and this might be the first one. This was fucking terrible. Let me be clear though. The production value that he got out of this from the things that he had in his tool belt just was absolutely mind-blowing. I think Bo Burnham is just massively talented, and I definitely admire that part of his work because it was just made and edited so well. But I hated this. Maybe it's because I hate musicals. Maybe because the humor just wasn't funny to me. It was very predictable where the jokes were going to go. It might have also been because I was in this situation where a friend was like, hey, watch this video. You know when someone comes up to you and they give you the video and they stand next to you and they watch you watching the video because they expect you to love it as much as they do, and you're just counting down the minutes? That could have possibly, maybe not, but maybe it could have affected my perception of this film. So yeah, I didn't enjoy it. I know I'm going to be very alone in this opinion, and I feel bad because, like I said, the production value was insane, but I've got to be honest, it's a 1.5 out of 5 for me. Coming to America. The humor was like nowhere near the level of the original. And I'd actually say the large set pieces and the scale of this movie actually worked against it. The original was set in America with a big personality in a normal circumstance, where this was a normal person in a big situation. And that can make it a lot less interesting and definitely a lot less funny. This was another disappointment. 2 out of 5. Chaos walking. I like the idea that the male's thoughts were out there for everyone to hear.
Yellow hair, pretty, really pretty. Please ignore that.
Like, what a terrifying premise. Of course not for me, because, you know, my thoughts are always pure. But for every other male, of course, terrifying. I wouldn't mind seeing Daisy Ridley in more movies. I'm not sure if we've actually seen the best from her just yet. But big names like Tom Holland and Mads Mikkelsen couldn't carry this film far enough. 2.5 out of 5. Free Guy. Ryan Reynolds is funny, but it's Ryan Reynolds. It's the same shit. And I think the concept of this movie, in our brains, in our childlike brains, sounds really cool. A background character in a video game. So the whole movie is like a GTA style video game. It sounds fun, but it just ends up being kind of lame. 2 out of 5. Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard. Here is an example of where Ryan Reynolds does better. And I think the reason it works well is because Selma Hayek's character is over the top and Samuel L. Jackson's character is over the top as well. And he's just sort of reacting to the circumstances around him. But it does get repetitive and the jokes kind of just get reused over and over again. You can get clips from this movie and they could end up being pretty funny by themselves, but it just gets pretty tiresome. 2.5 out of 5. Black Widow. Why the fuck is there another Marvel movie? It's just getting so bad. There is just an over-saturation of Marvel movies. There's just no tension to this movie at all. Ask me what happens in this movie. I couldn't tell you. 1.5 out of 5. Wrath of Man. This is a good follow from Black Widow. I might as well just say the same thing. What happens in this film? Well, I guess I can actually tell you. A guy's son gets killed and he goes and gets revenge on them. Very interesting. 1.5 out of 5. Boiling Point. Thank God. A good movie. I personally really love when films can make use of one location. When you can make use of one location and write a script around it, you get some really interesting results. You're kind of forced to make something interesting. I really like this film. It's simple, it's easy to follow, there's no gunfire or explosions or any of that shit. It's just a story set in a restaurant. 4 out of 5. F9. Talk about a good film. Ooh. This is not one of them. I mean, there are very funny moments in this. It's just so bad, but it's also so funny that 1, a professional company actually funded this film. 2, professional actors actually worked and showed their faces in this film. And 3, there are people who unironically think that these films are any good. I almost feel bad for Vin Diesel. He doesn't have anything else. 2 out of 5 for making me laugh. Wrong Turn. Horror movies are generally pretty crappy. But you know what? This wasn't that bad. I'd actually say I really enjoyed it. It was set mostly in the day and it was actually trying to tell you a story. The other thing that I like about this film is that it kind of leaves you on a cliffhanger 2/3 of the way in and then proceeds to tell a separate story to answer that cliffhanger. 3.5 out of 5. Mortal Kombat. Hey, another movie that surprised me. And I've got to say, this movie was only good and only survived because of Josh Lawson's Kano. Kano was the movie. The reason to watch this film is Kano. There are actually so many good moments in this film because of him and the humor that he brings. And like I said, he's kind of the only reason to watch it. 3.5 out of 5. Godzilla vs. Kong. I've got to be honest and say, I don't remember this movie. I just skimmed through it to refresh my memory and I remember next to nothing about this film. This might be a spoiler, but there's a robot Godzilla in it too? Like, when did that happen? I legitimately don't remember that part. I remember it being really shit. And at the time I rated it a 1 out of 5. So there you go. 1 out of 5. Beckett. I think the premise was actually interesting, and I like John David Washington, but this just didn't hit the mark. And I think honestly, and I'm not sure why, I'm just sick of seeing Alicia Vikander in movies. This movie just had no reprieve, and that could work sometimes, but for this film, it just didn't. 2 out of 5. Space Jam: A New Legacy. Here we go with another spicy opinion. Everyone hated this. Whether it was because they were redoing an older movie from childhood, or whether it was because LeBron James is the lead and everyone seems to hate him, or because the animation styles changed from like drawings to 3D. To me, it didn't really bother me to redo it. I think I've just always really loved Looney Tunes, that I just really enjoyed seeing them again. And I really enjoyed all the Warner Brothers IP that they throw into it as well. I thought it was fine. I think if there was anything that you had to remove, it was just that rap scene. That needs to go. But the rest was fun. It's a children's movie and you have to look at it with that lens, and I thought it was a pretty decent children's movie. 3 out of 5. The Card Counter. I fucking hated this film. It made next to no logical sense. The character choices were either unexplained or nonsensical. Like, for example, the main character wraps everything up in his hotel room with bed sheets. Maybe it's to hide his DNA, or maybe it's because in the movie he says he likes the simplicity of a prison cell, and so maybe he wants to emulate that. But it doesn't matter, because there are many instances where this sort of stuff happens, where it's like decoration sprinkled onto the film to make it seem more interesting, because the film fundamentally is just terrible. The fisheye lens in the flashback scenes is so jarring and atrocious. It should never be part of a film. I just don't understand. This movie, spoiler, is not about card counting. Like, it is not about card counting at all. Oscar Isaac, obviously a great actor, is just so bland in this film, and I don't think that's his fault. I fucking hated it. I can't state that enough. I fucking hated this film. Half out of 5. The Last Night in Soho. So this was interesting. Edgar Wright makes some really great films, and so I just don't know what happened here. It might be because it was a pretty heavy genre shift for him. I don't know. I was really excited to see this film, but in reality, it's just not very good at all. I think both Thomason and Anya are very interesting actors, and they sort of made this film more interesting. But it was just so obvious what was going to happen in this film. And the visual style of Edgar Wright is just really, really nice, but this film just didn't come together that well. I was really disappointed by this film. 2.5 out of 5. Candyman. Speaking of disappointment, this movie looked so good in the trailers, but fuck, this was so bad. Like, it was shot really well and it looked really nice. The story was just so uninspired that people who were looking for a good story didn't get that. Horror lovers got all the kills done off screen, so they didn't get that. A good-looking film cannot carry it to greatness. Sometimes it makes it even worse because it just begs the question of what could it have been? 2 out of 5. Reminiscence. Movies like this drive me wild. Their production is passable. The script and the story are passable. The premise of this one was maybe a little bit more passable than others. And then you have a great cast. This is one of those films that maybe if a couple of choices were made differently, it could be so much better. But this film at no point is ever any good. It's just like one of those films. You know what I mean? 1.5 out of 5. Pig. I like how fresh it was in terms of its story and its approach. Some people are saying it's like the best movie ever, but I don't know. I wouldn't go that far. I wouldn't go close to getting that far. But it was good. It was shot beautifully. We got some decent acting from Nick. And overall, it delivered very well on what it was trying to be. 3.5 out of 5. Power of the Dog. Yeah, let's talk about Power of the Dog. Let's just be real. There just really wasn't that much of a story at all. And the story, the little one that it did kind of have, wasn't even great to begin with. Benedict Cumberbatch was kind of terrible in this. The part didn't suit him and he just did not hit the mark with it. Kirsten Dunst is probably as interesting as a wet towel. And Jesse Plemons is just not interesting to me at all. He hasn't really shown much variety in his career so far. I think Cody Smith-McPhee was the most interesting part of this film, but hopefully he doesn't get typecast in the future, which probably is going to happen. I kind of want to spoil the movie because I could tell you the story in like a sentence or two. Anyway, I expected way more from the setting and it just didn't deliver. 2 out of 5. Kate, some fairly decent action scenes, but mostly a pretty generic action movie. 2 out of 5. Swan Song. There are two movies called Swan Song in 2021. I'm talking about the one with Mahershala Ali. I think for a futuristic concept, it actually did pretty well, because that in films is really difficult to do. The cast were really good. I think in general, it was just a really good film. It poses quite an interesting question. If you were terminally ill, would you clone yourself and not tell anyone? And it's a fucking hard question to answer. I think the movie did well to go through it, and Mahershala and Naomi are always pretty good. And Awkwafina is in this film, and she's actually pretty decent in it. 4 out of 5. Don't look up. This is an okay movie. I think obviously the message is great, but even with all the big name actors it could get, it just didn't line up very well. It was trying way too hard to be funny. 3 out of 5. The Green Knight. I fucking hated this movie. I can't tell you how much I hated this movie. I hated it more than The Card Counter. This is on my list as one of the worst films that I have ever seen. The original story that this movie is based on is actually interesting. They didn't do that story. They adapted it differently. It has Barry Keoghan in it, who is the most overrated, overused, quirky actor of our generation. There's a talking fox in it. There are giant naked women in this film for some fucking reason. They serve no purpose to the story. They're just there. The main character uses his sash as a cum rag. That was my favorite part. That's probably the best part of the movie. It's metaphorical. That's great. I love that. Whenever something doesn't make sense in a movie, or is just overcomplicated for the sake of being overcomplicated, it's metaphorical. You just don't understand it. It's all in Old English, which Shakespeare has fucking destroyed my patience with that. But the cinematography was good. Did you see the scenes in the forest? They were beautiful. I don't give a fuck that it looked good. I could YouTube 4K nature and forest video and get the same result. It's a shit movie. I'd rather watch Eternals 3 times in a row than watch this. 0.5 out of 5. That's being generous. The Last Duel. Oh yes, I definitely purposely put this film right after The Green Knight. I really liked the idea and execution of this story. It goes through 3 different accounts of the same story. It was actually really interesting to see how their stories differed from one another. Adam Driver did a really great job of being the antagonist. And generally, I thought they tackled a really serious topic quite well. Ben Affleck is also like peroxide blonde, which is just so funny to see. 3.5 out of 5. House of Gucci. I was so excited to see this film. The plot, especially being based off a true story, just seemed so interesting to me. Yet somehow it just all fell apart. This was done by Ridley Scott as well, who did The Last Duel. Obviously, it looked great and the costumes were fucking awesome because it's all Gucci stuff, but it was way too long and the accents are all over the place. You would think a family who grew up together and lived in the same region would have the same accent, but that just doesn't happen. There just wasn't much to grip me into liking this film. 2 out of 5. The Suicide Squad. This was fun, and it wasn't even a reboot, it was actually a sequel. It was funny, it was entertaining, it was just so much better than the original. I'm surprised, but I actually liked it a lot. 4 out of 5. Ghostbusters Afterlife. This was such a good looking movie at the start of the film. And I think the start is actually the most interesting part, but it just did not sustain my interest and just fell apart. American movies just love stereotyping kids, and this is just full of it. The music was really 90s and really nice though, but it definitely a forgettable movie. I can't tell you what happened in it. 2.5 out of 5. Venom, Let There Be Carnage. This movie was just so funny to me. Tom Hardy just does Venom so well. It wasn't a special movie, it wasn't very impactful, but it was fun and it was funny. I don't know if Venom is meant to have like a simplistic, childlike character to him, but I had some good laughs in it and it works really well. 3.5 out of 5. Meet the Ricardos. Nicole Kidman fucking killed it as Lucille Ball. I actually think that the real Lucille Ball was really funny, really talented, like a once in a lifetime sort of talent. And this movie wasn't perfect, but I think it captured her process really well. 3.5 out of 5. The Guilty. Like I mentioned before, I really enjoy movies that can utilize one location. And I really enjoyed this film. I can understand that this film is not for everyone. I think Jake carried the parts of this film that weren't so great. It's probably not something I'd watch again, but I did find it enjoyable on its solo viewing. 3.5 out of 5. Jungle Cruise. Main characters don't like each other at the start of the movie. Main characters like each other at the end of the movie. 1 out of 5. Nitram. What an important time for this film to come out. It could have been a train wreck, but they managed to actually pull this off pretty well. The main actor, wow. I'm not sure what else to say about this film. Go into it expecting to be devastated. 4 out of 5. Spiral. I was excited for another Saw film, but I think it's probably time that I just let it go. 2 out of 5. The Tomorrow War. I was expecting this to be complete trash, and it wasn't. Well, not completely. Someone needs to fire that continuity person. I don't think anyone expected this to be a big deal, and it isn't. I wouldn't recommend it. Watch something else. 2.5 out of 5. Without Remorse. It's a decent action movie, but it's definitely background watching. 3 out of 5. Spider-Man No Way Home. I enjoy this movie and I think it was pretty fun. I'll be honest though, I think without the surprise of what it was, I'm not sure it would actually have felt and been that good. But if you're into the Spider-Mans, it does make it fun. Marvel is starting to become very uninteresting, but a movie like this changes it up and opens up ideas for other movies like this. 4 out of 5 if you're into Spider-Mans, 3 out of 5 if you're not. The Little Things. Another movie I expected more from. It was kind of trying to be darker than it actually was. It felt a little bit disjointed. It was trying to sway you one way, but then went in another. Jared Leto was decent in it. That was a surprise. Maybe he was playing himself. I don't know. I think the movie thought it was going to have a bigger impact than it actually did. It had a strong look and a strong cast that didn't work out. 3 out of 5. The Woman in the Window. This was bad. This was really bad. From the trailers, it actually looked really, really decent, but it's bad. Do not watch this. 1.5 out of 5. The Mauritanian. This wasn't even on my radar. It was just something I happened to come across by chance. And it's really quite good. Really good watch. Kind of heartbreaking, but really quite a gem in a sea of movies from a year that didn't turn out really well. 4 out of 5. The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. I think The Conjurings are a passable horror franchise. They're not too bad. They're not too great, they're just easy watching. This is sort of the same thing. I really wouldn't rush out to watch it. 3 out of 5. Old. M. Night Shyamalan has not had a great streak as of late. But you know what? This was good. The premise was interesting. I thought it was going to go one way, but it actually went another. And I liked the twist. I mean, there's always a twist, but I liked it. I think it fit in well and it made sense. 3.5 out of 5. No Time to Die. Before anything, Ana de Armas was so good in this film that even James Bond acknowledged it.
You were excellent.
You too. Next time, stay longer.
It's unfortunately the finale for the greatest Bond that there ever was. I enjoyed the story, and I do enjoy all of Daniel Craig's Bond movies. And I think this was a good addition. The only thing I didn't like was how it ended, but I am really keen to see what they come up with next. 4 out of 5. Halloween Kills. It wasn't funny, it wasn't scary, it really had nothing going for it. They even tried... It's just so stupid. They even tried to pass off in the film that they killed Mike Myers when it was announced that this would be a trilogy. This movie legitimately sucked. 1.5 out of 5. The Many Saints of Newark. This needed more Tony Soprano. Dickie Moltisanti is just not an interesting character. Gandolfini's son played Tony and he fucking killed it. But spoiler, he's not a big part of this film. It's a pretty disappointing addition to arguably the greatest show ever made. 2.5 out of 5. King Richard. I didn't know this story and it was done really well on screen. Will Smith won an Oscar, obviously overshadowed by his actions at the Academy Awards. Watch my video on his apology. But I actually liked how this film followed Venus, the less successful of the two sisters. It was a heartfelt, enjoyable movie. 4 out of 5. Spencer. Kristen Stewart can act. Who would have thought? I did not see that one coming. But apart from that, this film is it's just not interesting. There are definitely a fuckload of Princess Diana fans. Maybe it's for them, I don't know. But it's definitely not interesting and it's more on the boring side. 2.5 out of 5. Judas and the Black Messiah. This movie has a lot to like about it. The story, which is true, is interesting and enlightening. I really like the way it was shot. I like the way it looked. I love the set pieces and I really love the costumes. It's a really interesting film. Really well acted. Definitely worth the watch. 4 out of 5. Well, that's it. That's all the 2021 films that I've seen. If you've seen something else and you want to let me know if it's any good or terrible, please let me know in the comments. If there's anything that you totally agree on or totally disagree on in my reviews, please let me know too in the comments, and subscribe for more content because I really like doing videos on films and I think I'm going to start doing a little bit more. Thanks for watching. There's actually a 2021 review that I did for other aspects of 2021 if you want to see that, and I'll see you all next time.